I used to be an organist and choir director at a church in Brooklyn, New York called Stuyvesant Heights. And because I was also doing Broadway shows from time to time, choir rehearsal was on Saturday morning because I had to make matinee. And the adult choir rehearsal began at 9 a.m. And they were a fine group of seasoned singers like our adult choir here. And there was a lady in the choir whose name was Joyce. I want to say Thomas. I can't remember her last name. But Joyce was a lovely lady. She and her family were from Jamaica. And Joyce worked all night long. So she came straight to rehearsal from work. So we would be singing, and after about 15 minutes, Joyce would fall asleep. And I just tried to work around it because she had worked all night long. But when she started to snore, I had to wake her up. Well, she was a soprano, and the sopranos thought the whole thing was hilarious. They loved to see their friend go down because they knew what was coming. They knew I was going to wake her up and she was going to feel bad, and that just made their Saturday. At the end of rehearsal, because I felt so bad and I didn't want her to think that I disliked her and I didn't want her to feel disrespected, I would often ask her to pray. I knew when Joyce began to pray that I was in for it. Joyce's prayers would sometimes go like this. Lord, bless Bill. He's a young man, Bill. He's a young man, and he doesn't always know how to work with adults. Improve his leadership, Lord. You know, Bill thinks he knows everything, but you know that. Help him, Lord. After the choir let out, I usually felt like I was about this tall. In the Gospel of John, ever since chapter 13, Jesus had been instructing the disciples, giving them final insights as to who he was in God. Who he was as he neared the end of his work, before his passion and his crucifixion. And after 3 years, some of them were still, like my dear friend Joyce, sleeping on the job. But in their defense, Jesus said a lot. If you have one of those King James red letter Bibles at home, the red letters denote when Jesus is speaking. The last 4 chapters of the Gospel of John are all written in red. But now in chapter 17, in the text that Fred read in our hearing, Jesus switches from speaking to the disciples to praying for the disciples, thinking about Joyce's prayer, to praying on the disciples. What would you rather do? Have Jesus talking to you or have Jesus praying on you? In this prayer, Jesus looks to the future of this little Johannine community, this little community of John. Jesus is aware that the church is entering very dangerous times. Now, these were churches that met in people's homes or in grottos under deserted buildings. No Bible, no creed, just an immediate experience of Jesus. John called Jesus the Logos, the living Word. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. But John sees the Logos under siege by the cosmos, the world. Not our physical planet, but the world of the Roman Empire, the world of the pagans, the world of the temple. Anyone opposed to this new movement by the Creator. As Jesus prayed, he knew that the Logos, the Word, the church under siege, had 2 opportunities. It could either splinter and fall apart and be at odds with each other, which meant that it would be pretty much like the cosmos, or it could be an amazing cohesion in the midst of turmoil. That is perhaps why Jesus prayed that the disciples and all those yet to be born, the church, you and I, would be connected just as he and God were, that they would be one. With Jesus' prayer, we see the ability to get along and cooperate with each other no matter what. It does not have its genesis in how smart or clever your leaders are, although we thank God for smart and clever leaders. It does not have its stability and assured legacy even on how much money each one of us gives, although may you continue to contribute regularly to the church today. Jesus is praying that we would understand that the ability to live and love and tolerate each other, no matter what, is of divine origin. Oneness has its genesis in God. Just as Jesus and God and Spirit found their relationship in each other. Christians have fought each other and killed each other over whether the members of the Trinity were co-equal. Whether the Father, Mother, Creator proceeds first, and then the Son, and finally the Holy Spirit, or if they're all co-equal. The Trinity, Father, Son, and Spirit, Creator, Redeemer, and abiding presence, was never about the supremacy of men. Of all of the Abrahamic religions, Christianity was the only one that reinvented itself. Christianity sent or called forth Jesus as the embodiment of God's heretofore unexplored love and mercy. It was a first century attempt to show not supremacy, but rather loving relationship between the different aspects of God. We are called to model in our hearts that loving relationship. When Christians are one with another, their unity surely allows the world to see the peaceable teacher, Jesus. Being one, the model and solution for the future unity of all humankind. Being one, seeing the peaceable teacher, Jesus. So in a world so fraught and distraught and so at each other's throats all the time, how do we attain oneness? How do we do it? Some have suggested that oneness, that transformative unity, is to be found in reciprocal love. What do we know about the divine love of God? In my class a few weeks ago, a student prayed that all of the bad things that we have been able to do to each other have not been able to stop God's love. So we know that divine love is unstoppable. God's love is ever flowing. If God has never stopped loving us, and love is always available from God, why do we have such a hard time with each other? I'd rather not do that. I just don't want to be bothered working with her. I'm not coming if he's coming. He gets on my nerves. They're not our kind. They have no class. Could it be that our capriciousness toward sharing the world's wealth, our faithlessness when dealing with each other, our inability to even be respectful when talking to each other, has it to do with how we really can't be bothered to go model God, and so our relationships smack of non-commitment? Are there times when even God can't get me to love that person? I was at the General Assembly a few years ago, and our general minister at the time decided that before we all assumed our great leadership positions of leading the choir and directing the assembly, that we should all do service projects first. That we should all go do something for mission, something for God. And so my job was to scrub all of the toys in the children's department. And the woman who was assigned my little area to work with me was a senior woman, probably an octogenarian, a white woman from the South. wearing an amazing two-piece silk suit. I will never forget. She looked amazing. But she had this ability to scrub the toys and not get a drop of water or dirt on that suit. She knew what she was doing, so I watched her and I scrubbed. And after a while, we were having a great time together. We were sharing stories and we were talking about, can you believe we're down here doing this before we have to go lead the assembly? And pretty soon the toys got clean and the room got clean and we were coming along pretty good. And right before it was over, I had to go check on some music, so I said, I'll be right back. And her name was Nora. She said, okay, I've got this under control. Just come back when you can. I said, okay. So I went to do what I had to do and I came back. But in the meantime, something had happened. When I got back, it was a different Nora. She was withdrawn and wan. She did not want to talk to me, and very soon she excused herself and left. Well, I was flabbergasted. So I asked somebody who was working in the area next to me what had happened. And they said, while you were gone, the project supervisor had come up and asked Nora how things were getting on, where I was and how things were getting on. And she said, oh, it's great. We're having a great time. I'm having the best time working with, the colored boy. Well, the project supervisor tore into her and said, you have no right to talk to him or refer to him in that way, and that was politically incorrect, and you should be more careful of how you talk. You were very insulting. And the woman said to me, who was telling me the story, she said, you would have been very proud. No, somehow I didn't feel proud. First of all, I missed this woman who referred to me as young anything. But secondly, I was working with a woman who was approaching 90. She had been through boy, Negro, African American, Afro-American, and a couple of other names that we won't mention in this place. She had lived through all of those when it was a time acceptable to use those. And anything that was said to her should have been said with care and concern that showed how we were one. I didn't feel offended. I felt hurt because what we modeled for the rest of the world was a church that inside was fractured. That well-meaning political correctness in this situation hurt a person and drove that person away from the church. This woman, neither she nor I were perfect, but together we were modeling the oneness of Christ Church. On a hot summer's afternoon, we were putting our talents together and making life better for some little children. That's what oneness looks like. And right in the middle of that, well-meaning, politically correct disunity showed up and modeled for us in the church, and for anyone looking at us outside of the church, why we are so fractured. Who wants to go somewhere where there is not peace and reconciliation on the other side of infraction? You can get that anywhere in the cosmos. Who wants to be constantly worried about being thrown out over the level of their considerate, diplomatic, gender-free, inclusive, inoffensive, liberal, multicultural worship? How is that any better than the Jews being denied access to the temple over issues of ritual purity? When Jesus Christ prayed that we might be one, just as Christ and God were one, it was about the church correcting bad thought and abusive behavior, but not throwing the perpetrator of such actions away. Jesus prayed that after the church would be one, Jesus said to that one disciple, do quickly what you have to do. What you have to do. Was Christ saying that in God's kingdom there would be a place even for the betrayer? Not because of what the betrayer did, and not because what the betrayer did wasn't horrible, but because being one includes everyone and everybody in all of creation.